He fired the shy, clumsy secretary in front of everyone, only to discover days later she's the only daughter of the billionaire that about to save his company. In the bustling corridors of the high-rise company headquarters, where ambition and fear intermingled in equal measure, a decision was made that would alter the course of many lives. The CEO, stern, self-assured, yet secretly haunted by the weight of his responsibilities, had taken a drastic step. In a moment of public humiliation, he dismissed the quiet secretary, whose unassuming presence and occasional clumsiness had been misinterpreted as incompetence. The office fell silent as the secretary, her eyes downcast and her hands trembling, gathered her few personal belongings. Each step she took away from her desk seemed to echo the finality of a judgment passed too hastily. Employees exchanged uneasy glances. Some whispered that she had been an indispensable part of the company, while others simply marveled at the boldness or cruelty of the act. For the CEO, the decision had been a desperate attempt to assert control in a time of mounting pressure, to cast off a liability as he struggled to preserve his dwindling authority. In the days that followed, the company was abuzz with rumors. Many speculated about the secretary's background. Some even wondered if the firing was a calculated move in a larger scheme. Yet, no one could have predicted the revelation that would soon come to light. Unbeknownst to all, the woman who had been dismissed so unceremoniously was not merely an ordinary employee. Her origins were humble, but hidden beneath the layers of poverty and hardship lay a truth that would shake the very foundation of the company. She was the only daughter of the billionaire investor whose fortunes were intertwined with the future of the enterprise. As whispers turned into loud discussions, the CEO found himself isolated by the unexpected consequences of his actions. Each board meeting, each quiet moment in his expansive office, was filled with a gnawing regret. He recalled the day of the firing, the stern tone, the forced bravado, and felt a heavy, lingering remorse. Could he have misjudged her? Was the decision driven more by his own internal pressures than by any fault on her part? In the solitude of his office, these questions circled his mind like vultures, feeding on the remains of his certainty. Meanwhile, the secretary's departure from the company marked the beginning of her own personal journey. Once considered clumsy and insignificant by those who only saw her on the surface, she now found herself at a crossroads. With little more than determination and a resilient heart, she stepped into a world that was at once indifferent and full of promise. Her days became a testament to the human spirit's capacity to rise above circumstance. In the quiet moments of early morning, as she navigated the city streets on her modest bicycle, she dreamed of a life where her worth was measured not by missteps, but by her inner strength and kindness. Back at the company, the CEO's internal struggle deepened. In late evenings, as he sat alone in the dim light of his office, he began to revisit every conversation, every decision that had led him to this point. He saw the faces of his employees, the disappointment, the silent judgment, and wondered if his quest for control had blinded him to the true value of compassion and understanding. His thoughts turned to the mysterious circumstances of the secretary's identity. How could someone so unassuming be connected to the very lifeline of the company? The thought tormented him, igniting both curiosity and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. In the midst of this inner turmoil, fate began to weave its intricate tapestry. The company, already reeling from financial strains and internal discord, now faced a looming crisis that threatened its very survival. Investors, long restless and uncertain, began to demand answers. The board, anxious for stability, pressed the CEO for a turnaround. And all the while, the truth about the secretary's heritage, her connection to the billionaire, began to emerge from the shadows of rumor and speculation. This unexpected twist forced the CEO to confront the consequences of his hasty decision. In a moment of clarity, he realized that beneath the surface of every mistake lay an opportunity for redemption. With the company's fate hanging in the balance, he resolved to seek out the woman he had wronged, to to offer not only an apology, but a chance to help steer the company toward a brighter future. Thus began a journey filled with emotional reckonings and challenging confrontations, a journey that would test the limits of pride, forgiveness, and the transformative power of second chances. As the company teetered on the edge of collapse, the lives of the CEO and the former secretary were inexorably drawn together, their fates intertwined by circumstances beyond their control. In the days following that fateful morning, the corridors of the company were filled with a heavy silence, broken only by murmurs of uncertainty. The CEO, once so confident in his decision, found himself wandering the halls of his own, making as though each step carried the weight of a mistake he could not undo. At night, when the building's lights dimmed to a few lonely bulbs, his thoughts returned again and again to the shy, clumsy secretary whose departure now echoed like a forewarning in his mind. He began to review that day in his mind, a day of public humiliation, not just for her, but for himself. Every word he had spoken in anger, every curt gesture, replayed like a broken film reel. In his solitary office, surrounded by empty chairs and the hum of the air conditioner, he felt the bitter sting of regret. Had I been too harsh? He wondered. Could I have looked beyond a simple mistake to see a hidden strength? Little did he know that fate was already setting in motion a twist that would soon bring the answer. While the company struggled to regain its footing amid financial strains and dwindling investor confidence, an unexpected visitor arrived at the boardroom door one morning. A representative of the company's richest investor, a man whose reputation in the business world was as legendary as his secretive nature, stepped inside with a calm, almost imperious manner. With every measured step and thoughtful glance, the visitor's presence hinted that this was no ordinary meeting. Without wasting time on pleasantries, the representative began to speak about a matter of great importance. "Sir," he said in a voice both gentle and firm, "I believe you are aware of the recent changes in the company's staff. There is an issue of personal consequence that extends far beyond the ordinary workings of our business." His eyes, dark and unwavering, locked with the CEO's as he continued. "The woman you dismissed, the secretary, is no mere employee. She is my daughter." The CEO's heart pounded. The words fell upon him like a cold shower, washing away every pretense of self-assured authority. In that moment, his mind raced back to the image of the young woman quietly packing her belongings, her trembling hands betraying an inner storm of emotions. The realization was as staggering as it was humiliating. Not only had he wronged an innocent soul, but he had also, unknowingly, set in motion a chain of events that touched the very lifeblood of his company. In the days that followed, the CEO found himself in an unaccustomed state of vulnerability. He no longer saw board meetings and quarterly reports as the sole measure of success. Instead, each moment was infused with the haunting memory of the firing, a decision that now loomed as a personal failure as much as a professional misstep. Unable to bear the constant reminders of his error, he began to observe the world outside his glass-encased office with new eyes. The bustling streets below, the soft murmur of voices in the hallway, and even the distant laughter from the break room, all seemed to mock him with their indifference to the depth of his regret. Meanwhile, the young woman had embarked on her own journey. The shock of her dismissal was compounded by the immediate and unrelenting whispers that spread through the business community. Friends and former colleagues struggled to reconcile the image of the timid secretary with that of the daughter of a billionaire, a woman of hidden worth and quiet dignity. Instead of retreating into silence, she found herself awakening to a quiet inner resolve. Every setback, every hurtful remark that followed her in the wake of the firing, became fuel for her determination to prove that her true value lay beyond any superficial mistake. Every morning, as the first light crept into her modest new apartment, she would stand by the window and reflect on the day ahead. She remembered the laughter of her childhood, a time when simple joys like playing in a sunlit garden were the measure of a happy life. Those memories became her guiding star. They whispered to her that she was more than a mistake in an overzealous moment, that her life was filled with potential waiting to be realized. And so, with a determined heart, she set out to reclaim her dignity, one small step at a time. Back at the headquarters, the CEO's inner turmoil grew. Nights were long and filled with dreams of missed opportunities and quiet apologies never uttered. The investor's representative had left him with a simple, yet piercing directive: to find the truth behind that dismissal and to seek redemption for the wrong that had been done. With each passing hour, the CEO's conscience urged him to rectify his mistake, to reach out to the woman he had so callously cast aside. On one particularly cool evening, as autumn leaves danced outside his window, the CEO made a decision. He could no longer allow pride to shackle him to a past that was both painful and inescapable. With a heavy heart, he called for a meeting with his senior staff, explaining that he would be taking a personal leave of absence to resolve a matter of great importance. Though the words were simple, the message was clear. Something deep and significant had changed within him. No longer was he the unyielding leader who had once ruled the boardroom with an iron fist. Now, he was a man humbled by his mistakes, determined to seek forgiveness and to learn from the consequences of his actions. Days turned into a reflective solitude for him, a time of introspection and of reaching out to those who might help him mend the fractured bridge between his heart and the one he had inadvertently broken. He began writing letters of apology, carefully choosing each word so that it might convey not only regret, but a sincere hope for forgiveness. The process was slow, painful even, as each sentence forced him to confront the shortcomings of his character. Yet, in that vulnerability, there was also a small seed of transformation, one that promised growth and the possibility of a new beginning. Across the city, the secretary, now known simply as Emily in the few kind words spoken by those who knew her true self, found herself at a crossroads of opportunity. In the aftermath of her dismissal, she began exploring avenues that had once seemed out of reach. She took up a small job at a community center, where her gentle nature and earnest efforts were met with gratitude by those she helped. In the quiet moments between work and rest, she continued to learn, enrolling in evening classes, reading books borrowed from a local library, and discovering that her mind was as capable and curious as anyone's. Slowly, Emily was rebuilding herself from the ground up, piece by fragile piece. It was during one of these quiet evenings that fate intervened yet again. A chance encounter in a local cafe brought together two souls who had been bound by circumstance long before their meeting. A mutual acquaintance, who recognized the spark of determination in Emily's eyes, mentioned that there was a way for her to find new purpose, a project that needed someone with a genuine heart and a keen sense of detail. The project was small at first, a community initiative to help local businesses thrive in a competitive market. But as Emily poured her heart into it, her natural talents began to shine, and whispers of her dedication reached the ears of influential people in the city. One such influential figure was the investor's representative, who had been quietly monitoring the unfolding events. He saw in Emily not only the daughter of a wealthy man, but also a woman of remarkable resilience and compassion, a combination that was rare in the ruthless world of high finance. It was then that he resolved to bring her talents to the forefront. He arranged a discreet meeting between Emily and the CEO, a meeting that would be the first step toward healing old wounds and forging a path to salvation for the troubled company. The meeting was set in a quiet conference room in a modest part of the company's headquarters, a place where the grandeur of wealth and power felt momentarily suspended by the simplicity of human connection. The CEO sat, his eyes weary yet hopeful, as he awaited the arrival of the woman he had wronged. Moments later, the door opened, and there she was, Emily, no longer the timid figure of the past, but a woman of quiet confidence and a gentle grace that belied the strength of her character. They sat across from each other in silence at first, the air thick with unspoken apologies and tentative hopes. The CEO, his voice soft and sincere, broke the silence. "Emily," he began, "I owe you an apology that no words can fully capture. I made a mistake, a mistake that I have regretted every moment since it happened. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me, not for my sake, but for the sake of what we might still achieve together." Emily listened, her eyes reflecting a myriad of emotions: hurt, sorrow, and a cautious glimmer of hope. In that quiet room, surrounded by the relics of corporate ambition, the seeds of reconciliation were planted. Emily's response was measured, as if each word was carefully weighed against the pain of the past and the promise of the future. "I've learned much since that day," she said softly. "Pain can teach us things that pride never could. I've seen my own worth, and I know that forgiveness is a step toward healing. But trust is not rebuilt in a single conversation." And so began a delicate dance of restoration. The CEO and Emily began to work together, slowly bridging the gap that had been created by one impulsive decision. Their interactions were cautious at first, each meeting a test of sincerity and commitment. The CEO listened more than he spoke, absorbing every word from Emily as if it were a lesson in humility. She, in turn, found that her guarded heart could begin to open in the presence of genuine remorse and a willingness to change. As days turned into weeks, their joint efforts began to bear fruit. The company, once teetering on the edge of collapse, started to show signs of recovery. Investors noticed the renewed energy and the subtle shifts in the company's strategy, a more compassionate leadership style that, while unconventional, began to win back trust. The board members, initially skeptical of the CEO's sudden vulnerability, gradually saw that his transformation was more than a temporary lapse of judgment. It was a genuine desire to make amends. Outside the walls of the company, the city itself seemed to take notice of this quiet revolution. Local newspapers reported on the unexpected turn of events, where a story of corporate arrogance gave way to one of human resilience and redemption. In humble editorials and opinion pieces, readers celebrated the possibility that even the most rigid of leaders could learn to bend, and that forgiveness, when extended earnestly, had the power to heal both personal and professional wounds. Through it all, Emily maintained her dignity. She balanced the demands of her newfound responsibilities with the delicate task of rebuilding her self-esteem. Each challenge that arose was met with the same quiet determination that had carried her through the worst of her days. And as she grew into her role as both a valued advisor and a symbol of resilience, she began to see that her life had taken a turn that, while painful in its inception, was ultimately full of promise. The CEO, too, changed. He began to understand that true leadership was not measured solely by the strength of one's decisions, but by the capacity to admit mistakes, learn from them, and extend genuine care to those who worked by one's side. His nightly reflections evolved from self-recrimination to a more hopeful vision of a future where empathy and accountability could coexist with ambition. As the company slowly emerged from its crisis, a new chapter was written. One where the unlikely partnership between a remorseful CEO and a resilient secretary sparked not only the revival of a one-sailing enterprise, but also the personal growth of two very different souls. Their journey was far from over. There were still challenges ahead, moments of tension and doubt that would test the fragile bond they had begun to build. Yet, in every setback, there lay an opportunity for deeper understanding and a reaffirmation of their commitment to change. In the quiet aftermath of their first true meeting, the CEO and Emily agreed to embark on a series of strategic initiatives aimed at stabilizing the company. They initiated programs to support not only the financial well-being of the firm, but also the emotional and professional development of its employees. Mentorship programs were established, and channels of communication were opened where once there had been only rigid hierarchies and unspoken resentments. Every step of this journey was a lesson in humility and forgiveness. The CEO would often recall the piercing moment when he learned that his harsh words had been directed toward the daughter of a man who had poured his fortunes into the company. It was a moment that had shattered his pride and forced him to look at the human beings behind the balance sheets. And in that moment of reckoning, he discovered that the true wealth of a company lay not in its assets or profits, but in the relationships that wove together the lives of those who made it run. For Emily, the transformation was equally profound. She learned that her worth was not defined by the quiet mistakes of the past, but by her perseverance and ability to grow. In every conversation with the CEO, in every shared moment of vulnerability, she reclaimed a piece of herself that had once been lost. The whispers of doubt that had followed her like shadows began to fade, replaced by a quiet confidence that radiated from within. As the weeks blended into months, the company not only recovered, but began to thrive in ways that defied the cynicism of its critics. The investor, once a distant figure whose presence was felt only through his financial contributions, became more involved, witnessing the transformation of his daughter from a dismissed secretary to a trusted advisor who helped steer the company toward success. The board, initially divided by shock and skepticism, gradually united behind a vision that embraced both innovation and compassion. It was in this environment of gradual healing and progress that the CEO and Emily found themselves at a crossroads, a point where the mistakes of the past had to be reconciled with the hope of a new future. With the company's fortunes on the rise and the promise of redemption in every sunrise, they began to explore not only the professional implications of their renewed partnership, but also the personal dimensions of trust and understanding that had blossomed between them. In the quiet moments after long days of planning and strategizing, the CEO would sometimes pause to gaze out of his office window, watching as the city below pulsed with life and possibility. He recognized that the scars of his past decisions might never completely fade, yet they had given him the courage to change. And in that silent acknowledgement, there was a promise, an unspoken vow that he would never again let pride or fear come between him and the people who believed in him. Thus, the journey of healing and redemption continued. A journey that was as much about saving a company on the brink of collapse as it was about discovering the resilient spirit within a once-forgotten secretary. Their story was one of mistakes and forgiveness, of hard lessons learned and new beginnings embraced. And as the sun set on another day of progress, both the CEO and Emily realized that while the past could never be changed, the future was theirs to shape, one sincere step at a time. The company began a new chapter as if waking from a long, troubled sleep. In the months after that quiet meeting, the CEO and Emily worked together to create an environment where trust, honesty, and compassion could grow. Their collaboration, once born out of regret and unexpected revelations, slowly blossomed into a careful partnership that both healed old wounds and built new foundations. Every morning, the CEO arrived at the office with a humble determination that surprised even himself. He started by addressing the staff in a simple meeting, explaining the changes he planned to implement. His tone was calm and sincere, and his eyes revealed the genuine regret he carried for the past. The staff, who had once watched him rule with an iron hand, now saw a man willing to learn and listen. Slowly, the atmosphere in the corridors changed, from one filled with whispered gossip and doubt to one where hope, though tentative, began to take root. Meanwhile, Emily continued her journey of self-reinvention. She had started working on a new project that sought to revitalize the community around the company. This initiative was simple in its goal: to help local small businesses grow by offering mentorship, financial advice, and a bit of the company's resources. Each day, as she walked through the city streets, Emily felt her confidence grow. The very traits that had once made her appear shy and clumsy now shone as quiet strength and determination. In the gentle hum of the busy streets, she found that her mistakes were not defining her. Rather, her willingness to learn and adapt did. For the CEO, the long hours spent alone in his office were no longer moments of self-punishment, but opportunities for reflection. He began to see that the company's success depended not only on hard decisions and strict policies, but also on understanding and supporting the people behind each role. With each letter of apology he wrote, with each sincere conversation he had with his team, the weight of his earlier arrogance lightened. He recognized that the painful event of firing Emily had been a catalyst, a moment that forced him to face the truth about himself and his leadership style. At the board meetings that followed, a subtle yet powerful shift took place. The CEO, once seen as a man who valued numbers over human lives, now embraced a leadership style that encouraged open communication and shared responsibility. He opened new channels for dialogue with his senior staff, inviting their ideas and concerns. His transformation was not met without resistance. Some board members were hesitant to trust a man who had once made a harsh decision without a second thought. Yet, as the company's fortunes began to stabilize, even the most skeptical began to see the benefits of his new approach. Outside the walls of the company, the community felt the effects of the internal changes. The local newspaper, always eager to report on stories of human interest, began to chronicle the unfolding tale of redemption. Readers learned of a CEO who had chosen humility over pride and a young woman who had turned heartbreak into hope. The headlines, simple and sincere, spoke of second chances and the power of transformation. And with each published story, more people in the community started to believe that even in the world of business, where hard decisions often left scars, there was room for healing and growth. The investor, whose influence had once seemed distant and imposing, became more involved as well. He visited the headquarters quietly, observing the shifts in strategy and spirit. His eyes, once full of suspicion, now carried a cautious optimism. He saw that his daughter, Emily, had not been defined by the mistake of being fired. Instead, she had grown into a capable and thoughtful leader whose ideas were now helping to guide the company toward a more promising future. With each visit, he left a little more hope behind, trusting that the man who had once been so unyielding was now on a path to genuine change. As the days turned to weeks and the weeks to months, the long road to redemption revealed both progress and challenges. New problems arose that tested the fragile trust between the CEO and his team. There were moments when past doubts flared up, when old habits of impatience and anger threatened to return. In one such instance, during a particularly stressful period of financial review, the CEO felt the familiar pull of his old ways. The pressures of numbers and deadlines tempted him to revert to a style of leadership that demanded obedience without question. Yet, every time he felt that urge, he remembered Emily's calm eyes and the way she had handled every challenge with a quiet dignity that spoke of deep inner strength. That memory grounded him, and he chose instead to address the team with openness, inviting them to share their thoughts and fears about the looming figures on the balance sheet. In the midst of these trials, the relationship between the CEO and Emily deepened. Their interactions were marked by honest exchanges that revealed not just professional insights, but personal vulnerabilities as well. They spent long evenings together, poring over reports and planning the next step for the company, but also sharing stories of their past, stories of mistakes made and lessons learned. The CEO spoke of the loneliness he had felt before he embraced a more empathetic approach, and Emily shared her journey from a timid employee to a woman who now knew her worth. These conversations were simple yet powerful. They were the threads that slowly wove a tapestry of mutual respect and understanding. One evening, as autumn deepened and the chill in the air signaled the coming winter, the CEO found himself walking through the quiet city streets. The soft glow of street lamps and the distant hum of life offered him a moment of reflection. He thought about how a single decision had led to a cascade of events that had reshaped not only his destiny, but that of the company and the community it served. In the gentle solitude of that night, he vowed to continue his journey of transformation, not just for himself, but for everyone who had been touched by his choices. He understood now that leadership was not about being right all the time, but about being human, capable of feeling, learning, and changing. The company, buoyed by the renewed spirit of its leadership and the tangible results of their initiatives, began to regain its strength. The strategic plans that had once been drafted with cold precision were now imbued with a sense of hope. New investments flowed in, and projects that had been stalled sprang back to life. Employees found themselves working in an environment that valued their contributions, and even the most junior staff began to see a future where they could grow. The turnaround was not a sudden miracle, but a slow, steady process of recovery that mirrored the personal journeys of the CEO and Emily. As winter gave way to the gentle warmth of spring, the company held a celebration. Not one marked by lavish parties or grand speeches, but a modest gathering that honored the spirit of renewal. In a simple ceremony held in the company's modest auditorium, employees, board members, and even the investor gathered to mark the progress that had been made. The CEO took a moment to address everyone, his voice steady and full of genuine gratitude. He acknowledged the mistakes of the past and celebrated the lessons learned. In his words, there was no pretense of perfection, only the honest recognition that every person in the room had played a part in the company's rebirth. Emily stood quietly near the back, listening as her story was gently recounted, a story of resilience, humility, and quiet strength. Her eyes, reflecting both the hardships of the past and the promise of the future, met the gaze of colleagues who now saw her not as the shy, clumsy secretary of old, but as a key architect in the company's new era. The applause that followed was not for a single individual, but for a collective journey of transformation, a journey that had taught everyone that even in a world of high stakes and hard decisions, the soft power of forgiveness and understanding could change lives. The celebration marked a turning point. The CEO, with his newfound humility, and Emily, with her inner strength, continued to work side by side. They faced future challenges with a shared vision, a belief that the company was more than the sum of its parts. It was a place where mistakes could be forgiven, where every setback was a lesson, and where every individual had the power to contribute to a greater good. Together, they forged a path that was neither easy nor without obstacles, but one that was filled with the promise of a brighter, more inclusive future. And so, the long road to redemption continued. Each step taken with care, each decision made with the lessons of the past in mind. The company grew stronger not through ruthless ambition, but through the nurturing of trust and the embracing of change. In every quiet office, every bustling hallway, and every shared moment of reflection, the story of a fired secretary and a remorseful CEO became a living testament to the idea that every mistake can lead to a better tomorrow if only one is willing to learn and forgive. As the company embraced a new era of hope and cooperation, a fresh challenge emerged that would test the fragile bonds newly formed. The season shifted once again, and with summer's arrival came both warmth and unexpected hurdles. While the board began to praise the progress made so far, rumors of a looming merger with a larger competitor threatened to disrupt the quiet harmony that had been so painstakingly built. Every morning, the CEO arrived at work with a determined spirit, aware that the coming days would require not just steady leadership, but also the wisdom to navigate turbulent negotiations. In his office, lined with mementos of past successes and failures alike, he prepared for a series of meetings that promised to be as challenging as they were crucial. He knew that the fate of the company and the personal redemption he had fought so hard to achieve depended on reaching a fair agreement with a potential partner. Across town, Emily, now a respected figure within the company, was busy managing her community project. The initiative she had nurtured was thriving, its success reflected in the vibrant small businesses and smiling faces of local shopkeepers. Yet, even in this peaceful work, she sensed a disturbance. The merger, if it went ahead, could mean restructuring and changes that might affect not only her own role, but the very people she had come to care about deeply. One sultry afternoon, as the office buzzed with a mix of anticipation and anxiety, the CEO convened a critical strategy session. Around a long table in a well-lit conference room, senior staff and key advisors gathered. The conversation was intense, yet measured. Every voice carried its own concerns about what the merger might mean for the company's unique culture. Understand the fear of change, the CEO began, his tone both earnest and steady. But we must remember the strength that has carried us this far. Our team is not defined by our title or our salary. It is defined by the resilience and commitment each one of you has shown in overcoming past mistakes. I ask you to trust in this new chapter and in the partnership we are about to forge. The meeting ended on a note of cautious optimism. Though uncertainty remained, a sense of unity prevailed, driven by the belief that the company's future was built on both innovation and empathy. In the following days, as negotiations with the rival company commenced, the CEO and Emily found themselves working side by side more closely than ever before. Their conversations, once limited to corporate matters, now ventured into the realm of shared vision for the company's future. Late evenings were spent reviewing proposals, drafting responses, and, on occasion, laughing together over small, human moments that reminded them of how far they had come. During one such evening in the quiet of the conference room, as the city's lights twinkled in the distance, Emily shared a memory from her childhood. "I used to watch my father work in a small workshop," she recalled softly, "where every mistake was a lesson and every tool had a purpose. He always said that the beauty of life lies in building something with your own hands, even if you have to start over several times." Her words resonated deeply with the CEO, who had learned that true leadership was as much about rebuilding trust as it was about steering the company toward profit. Inspired by this memory, the CEO proposed a bold idea during one of the high-stakes negotiation meetings. "What if we create a joint venture that not only combines our resources, but also preserves the culture that makes us unique?" he suggested, his voice carrying both hope and conviction. Emily's eyes lit up at the thought. A merger that did not erase the identity of either company, but instead forged a new path together. It was a vision where every employee's contribution was valued, and where growth was measured not only in revenue, but in the positive impact on the community. The proposal sparked a flurry of discussion. Board members, initially cautious about the idea of a merger, began to see potential in the CEO's vision. The negotiations shifted from a battle for dominance to a conversation about mutual benefit. Both companies, despite their differences, recognized that by working together, they could achieve more than either could alone. As talks progressed, the atmosphere changed from tense anticipation to collaborative problem-solving. Outside the formal meeting rooms, the human side of the process unfolded as well. The CEO and Emily took walks together in the nearby park during lunch breaks, where they would talk about not just the merger, but also the simple pleasures of life. A shared cup of coffee, the laughter of children playing, or the quiet rustle of leaves in the summer breeze. These moments, though small, strengthened the bond between them, reinforcing the idea that leadership was not solely about business strategy, but also about caring for one another. Over the following weeks, as the joint venture took shape, the company began to witness tangible changes. New departments were formed, blending teams from both companies, and fresh ideas flowed from every corner of the workspace. The once skeptical board members now marveled at the energy and innovation that the merger had ignited. Investors, too, were encouraged by the progress, their confidence growing as the financial outlook brightened with each passing day. Yet, the path was not entirely free of setbacks. There were moments when old insecurities crept back into the minds of employees, and minor disputes flared up amid the chaos of change. In these moments, the CEO's new approach was tested. He made it a point to hold open forums, where every concern could be aired and addressed without fear of retribution. Emily, with her gentle determination, often moderated these sessions, ensuring that every voice was heard and every worry met with a solution grounded in empathy. One day, as the joint venture's launch drew near, a crisis arose. A misunderstanding about resource allocation threatened to derail months of hard work. Tensions ran high, and it seemed as though the delicate balance they had achieved could be upset in an instant. It was during this crisis that the CEO and Emily truly demonstrated their growth. Recognizing that the discord was born of old habits and miscommunication, they organized a series of team-building exercises designed to rebuild trust and clarify roles. The sessions, though challenging at first, soon blossomed into a forum where creative ideas and mutual respect flourished. In the end, the crisis became a turning point. Employees learned that when differences were met with understanding and when leadership was willing to admit mistakes, even the most turbulent storms could be weathered. The joint venture was launched with a sense of pride that came not from the merger itself, but from the journey that had led up to it, a journey of forgiveness, resilience, and the courage to change. As the new alliance took firm root in the corporate landscape, the CEO looked back on his past decisions with a mix of regret and gratitude. He realized that his initial error, the firing that had set all this in motion, had been a painful, yet necessary, catalyst for transformation. Emily, once seen as a timid and clumsy secretary, had grown into a beacon of strength and innovation, her quiet determination now shining as a guiding light for the company's future. Together, they stood at the threshold of a new beginning, one where every employee was valued, every mistake was an opportunity for learning, and where the spirit of collaboration promised not only financial success, but a legacy of compassion and resilience. The CEO and Emily, having forged a new alliance through shared trials and triumphs, now looked forward with hope, ready to face whatever challenges the future might hold. In the gentle wake of the joint venture's successful launch, the company stepped into a period of transformation that promised to redefine its future. The CEO and Emily found themselves at the heart of a new era, one where every decision was taken with the lessons of the past in mind, and every step forward was a tribute to the power of second chances. The boardroom, once a place of cold figures and rigid policies, now pulsed with a creative energy that reached every corner of the enterprise. The CEO, now a man marked by humility and growth, began to approach each day with a renewed sense of purpose. Gone were the days when he ruled with a heavy hand. Instead, he led by example. Morning meetings became moments of genuine conversation where ideas were shared freely and every voice was invited to speak. He introduced new policies that encouraged transparency and recognized the individual contributions of every employee, from senior executives to the most junior team members. This shift was not without its challenges. Old habits, both in himself and among his colleagues, sometimes rose up like stubborn shadows. Yet, with each challenge, he remembered the hard truth of his past and found strength in the collective hope that now filled the office halls. For Emily, the journey had evolved far beyond the painful memory of her dismissal. No longer defined solely by the scars of an unjust past, she had blossomed into a leader whose ideas and empathy had become central to the company's rebirth. With the merger proving a turning point, Emily spearheaded a series of community-focused initiatives. She partnered with local schools and small business owners to create mentorship programs, job fairs, and skill-building workshops. These programs, driven by her own experiences of struggle and renewal, resonated deeply with both the employees and the broader community. In every smile of a local entrepreneur and every grateful nod from a student, she saw the promise of a future where every setback could be transformed into an opportunity for growth. Outside the company, the renewed spirit of the enterprise began to attract attention from far and wide. Journalists who once focused on corporate scandals now found themselves writing human interest stories about the dramatic turnaround. A story of a remorseful CEO and a once dismissed secretary who had become the linchpin of a new vision. Investors, initially cautious and skeptical, slowly returned with confidence as quarterly reports reflected not only financial recovery, but a profound cultural change. The community, too, took pride in the transformation. Public meetings and open forums were organized where citizens and employees could discuss ideas for future projects, creating a rare and genuine bridge between business and society. Despite the outward signs of success, the path ahead was not without internal conflicts. As new departments merged and roles were redefined, friction sometimes emerged between long-standing employees and those who were brought in as part of the merger. In these moments, the CEO and Emily found that their partnership was being tested anew. They organized regular team-building sessions and honest town hall meetings where every concern was addressed openly. In one memorable session, when tensions ran high over budget cuts and shifting responsibilities, Emily stood before a group of anxious employees. With calm determination, she shared her own journey, from the timid young woman who once felt invisible to the confident leader she had become. "We are all learning," she said softly, "and every mistake is a lesson. Together, we can build a future where every voice is valued." Her words, simple yet sincere, helped to diffuse the tension and reminded everyone that the company's strength lay in its diversity of thought and experience. As months turned into a year, the transformation that began with a single act of harsh judgment had rippled through every level of the company. The CEO continued his quiet, reflective walks in the evenings, where he would often pause and look up at the city skyline, a silent promise to himself that he would never allow pride or fear to cloud his judgment again. Emily, too, embraced her new role with both passion and pragmatism. Together, they instituted new systems of accountability and support, ensuring that mistakes were no longer met with punitive measures, but seen as opportunities for collective learning. The investor, who had once seemed a distant and imposing figure, now played an active role in mentoring the next generation of leaders within the company. In private conversations, he spoke of his own early missteps and how the lessons of humility had eventually led him to value innovation over rigid tradition. His relationship with both the CEO and Emily grew stronger as he recognized in them the same capacity for change that he had come to treasure. The company, once a symbol of corporate rigidity and detached ambition, was now seen as a beacon of modern leadership, a place where accountability, compassion, and resilience work together to create lasting success. In the soft light of early spring, as the company celebrated another milestone with a modest ceremony in a newly renovated hall, the CEO and Emily stood side by side. There were no grand speeches, no fanfare, just a quiet acknowledgement of the journey they had taken together. The applause from the gathered crowd was gentle but sincere, filled with gratitude for the renewed culture that had transformed not just an organization, but the lives of everyone connected to it. In that moment, both the CEO and Emily understood that the most important victories were not measured in profits or accolades, but in the honest, everyday acts of forgiveness, understanding, and mutual respect. The story of a fired secretary and a remorseful CEO had evolved into a saga of rebirth and hope. Their partnership had rewritten the rules of leadership and transformed a company on the brink of collapse into an institution that celebrated every setback as a stepping stone to a brighter future. And as they faced the uncertain horizon together, one thing remained clear: true change, however difficult the journey, was possible when guided by the gentle, enduring power of compassion and trust. In the years that followed the dramatic transformation, the company found itself standing at the crossroads of opportunity and challenge, a moment when past mistakes had been transformed into the fuel for future success. The CEO and Emily, now inseparable in their shared mission, continued to nurture the culture of empathy and innovation that had become the company's hallmark. Yet, as with any true journey, the road ahead was not without its trials. The seasons shifted once more, and with the crisp air of early autumn came new challenges that tested the resilience of the revitalized enterprise. Market pressures, fierce competition, and the ever-changing landscape of global business threatened to shake the newfound harmony. During this time, the CEO began receiving reports of unexpected fluctuations in the company's performance. Despite the confident strides they had made, investors grew cautious, and some long-standing employees began to express their worries about maintaining the delicate balance between innovation and stability. One rainy afternoon, as droplets raced down the large windows of his office, the CEO sat with a furrowed brow, deeply immersed in the numbers and projections that now dominated his every thought. The familiar pressure of decision-making weighed heavily on him. But this time, it was not the solitary burden of a man clinging to outdated methods. Instead, he carried with him the lessons of transformation, a realization that true leadership demanded both courage and vulnerability. Across the hall, Emily was busy coordinating a series of workshops designed to bolster employee morale and equip teams with the skills needed to thrive in an unpredictable market. She had come to believe that the company's strength lay in its people. Her workshops were not just about strategy and business models. They were about forging connections, sharing personal stories of struggle and success, and reminding everyone that together they could weather any storm. In one such session, she shared a heartfelt anecdote of how a small misstep early in her career had eventually led her to discover her hidden talents, and the room resonated with a collective understanding. Mistakes were not endpoints, but stepping stones to greatness. That same day, the CEO and Emily convened an emergency meeting with the senior management team. The atmosphere was tense, a blend of urgency and cautious hope. The CEO, with his voice soft but determined, laid out the stark realities of the market challenges they faced. "We have built something precious here," he said, his gaze sweeping the room. "But we must now defend it against forces that threaten our progress. Our strength lies not in rigid adherence to old formulas, but in our ability to adapt, learn, and grow together." His words, though measured, carried the weight of years of introspection and the scars of earlier missteps. Over the following weeks, a series of initiatives were launched to address these challenges head-on. Cross-departmental task forces were formed to tackle specific issues, ranging from streamlining production processes to enhancing customer service through digital innovation. The CEO, once accustomed to dictating every move from his high-backed chair, now participated actively in these task forces, often seen alongside employees on the factory floor or in brainstorming sessions in the open office area. His willingness to roll up his sleeves and listen deeply became a living lesson in leadership that inspired others to follow suit. Emily, ever the pillar of resilience, oversaw the launch of an internal mentorship program aimed at nurturing young talent within the company. She paired seasoned employees with new recruits, encouraging a culture where ideas were freely exchanged and no one felt isolated in their struggle to adapt to new demands. In these meetings, she was both mentor and student, a constant reminder that growth was a two-way street. Her personal story of being dismissed, only to rise through the ranks through perseverance, became a beacon for those who doubted their own potential. Every success, every small breakthrough, was celebrated as a collective victory over the inertia of old ways. Despite these forward-moving initiatives, there were moments when the company's progress was punctuated by setbacks that seemed almost too heavy to bear. A sudden downturn in the market, unexpected regulatory changes, and a miscommunication with a major client led to a short-lived crisis that threatened to undo months of hard-won progress. In one particularly challenging board meeting, the air was thick with tension. Investors, their faces etched with concern, demanded explanations and assurances that the company could navigate the storm. It was in that moment of crisis that the CEO's transformation was most visibly put to the test. He took a deep breath and began speaking not as a distant executive, but as a leader who had learned the true meaning of accountability. "I stand before you not as someone who has all the answers, but as a man who has learned from his mistakes," he confessed, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We will confront these challenges head-on, together. Our past has taught us that every setback is an opportunity to rebuild stronger." His candid admission, delivered with a raw sincerity, resonated deeply, not only with the board members, but with every employee who had witnessed the company's rebirth. In the days that followed, a renewed sense of purpose permeated every corner of the organization. Collaborative problem-solving sessions, often led by Emily, allowed teams to innovate solutions that balance financial prudence with creative risk-taking. The crisis, while painful, became the catalyst for a new wave of internal reforms. Systems were updated, communication channels were fortified, and a culture of resilience was further entrenched in every policy. During this period of intense activity, the bond between the CEO and Emily grew even stronger. In quieter moments away from the relentless pace of boardrooms and project deadlines, they would share long conversations over cups of coffee in the company's modest break room. They discussed not only the strategies needed to steer the company through turbulent times, but also their personal hopes and fears. The CEO confided in Emily about the lingering doubts that sometimes haunted him, fears that his past decisions might forever cast a shadow over his leadership. Emily, with a gentle smile and steady resolve, reminded him that every day was a chance to redefine one's legacy. "We are the sum of all our choices," she would say softly. "Let us choose to build a future that honors our lessons and our potential." As autumn gave way to winter, the company emerged from the crisis with a renewed spirit of unity and an invigorated strategy for the future. The challenges had not disappeared, but they had been met with a collective will that made every obstacle seem surmountable. The once divided board now operated as a cohesive body, united by a shared vision that blended financial success with the genuine welfare of every employee. At the annual general meeting, held in a modest auditorium adorned with banners celebrating both past struggles and future promise, the CEO delivered a speech that captured the essence of the company's journey. He recounted the story of a fired secretary and a remorseful CEO, a story that had come full circle and taught him the immeasurable value of forgiveness, empathy, and collaboration. His words, spoken with heartfelt conviction, were met with a standing ovation from an audience that now saw in him not just a leader of a company, but a leader of people. In that moment, as the applause filled the room and the winter chill was held at bay by the warmth of shared triumph, the CEO and Emily exchanged a quiet, knowing look. They both understood that while the journey was far from over, they had built something extraordinary, a legacy of resilience, compassion, and unwavering determination. Their combined journey had not only transformed a struggling company, but had also woven a narrative of hope that would inspire generations to come. And so, in the silent promise of a new dawn, the company prepared to face the future. Every challenge that lay ahead was seen as a chance to prove that change was not a one-time act, but a continuous process of learning and growth. Together, the CEO and Emily, and every person whose life had been touched by their journey, embraced the trials and triumphs of tomorrow, ready to write the next chapter of a story that was as much about the human spirit as it was about business success. As the company stepped into a new year, there was a quiet strength in every hallway, every department, every heartbeat of its people. What had started as a scandal, a public firing of a shy, clumsy secretary, had evolved into a legacy of redemption, resilience, and real leadership. The CEO, once known for his cold precision, now walked the floors with a listening ear and open heart. Emily, the once dismissed secretary turned strategic force behind the company's revival, stood not only as a board member, but also as a living symbol of what happens when potential is recognized, nurtured, and unleashed. Their story of mistakes, humility, and transformation became a case study in business schools and a tale whispered with admiration across the industry. But for those who truly understood, it wasn't just a corporate success story. It was a human story, a story of how pain can teach us, how pride can blind us, and how one person, seemingly small and overlooked, can be the key to saving everything. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there reading or listening to this is that key. You may be underestimated today, overlooked, or even dismissed.